evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's episode of Generally Irritable. I don't know about you guys, but I get delighted and giggle a little bit every time that eagle comes on and the end plays with the screeching sound of the eagle. We were talking about it off stage just a second ago. I love that thing. It was the best purchase I made for my 2020 Stay Senate campaign. Just for the record, total side note that has absolutely nothing to do with today's episode. So glad everyone is here with us today. I have two guests. Well, I guess technically I have three guests, but Rebecca and Nicholas Lalanne of, I'm going to DVAS. I'm going to get the acronym. I don't want to mess up the acronym. I don't want to mess it up. My brain just farted. I got all nervous. And then I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to say it wrong.
No worries.
Deaf Vermont Advocacy Services. Deaf Vermonters Advocacy Services.
Correct.
Guys. Oh my God, I'm all nervous. I don't want to mess up. I met Rebecca, actually, I first saw her at an event I attended hosted by the Vermont Center for Independent Living. So now, Rebecca, were you actually providing interpretation services or were you there as someone who utilizes their services?
That's a great question. So I went specifically for the ADA celebration. It was ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act Awareness Day. So as the director of Deaf Vermonters Services, I wanted to make sure that I was there to see how it was going, check out the panel, and just mingle with folks. So I went as myself.
That's awesome. So I first saw her there, and you guys, it was really amazing to watch because it was a group of folks all dealing with or having special circumstances in their lives that has them associated with the Vermont Center for Independent Living. So whether maybe folks who are deaf or blind or, in a wheelchair for some reason, something like that. It was this really interesting group of people. And then everyone there also helping everyone. Like it was just this room of people who really seemed to care about one another. And there was a lot of, I don't know, there was just a real sense of loving, giving, and caring people in that room that day. And so when I got the opportunity to talk to Rebecca a little bit more about, some bills that are coming up in the legislature, like some things that they're hoping to do in schools, I just thought we need to get these folks on air. We need to have an opportunity for my viewers to get to talk to you, Rebecca, and your husband, Nicholas, and just share some of the services that you all provide, maybe some gaps that you're seeing that, maybe the community, the people, Vermonters, our neighbors can help fill in the gaps. I want to talk about those things and just really provide an opportunity for people to understand, right? So I mentioned before the show, and you guys, my viewers, have heard me say this 1,000 times, lack of proximity is one of the greatest hindrances to people being able to understand each other. If I don't ever meet a deaf person, then I don't ever know what they're dealing with. If I don't ever meet a Black person, I don't know what they're dealing with. If we don't get to communicate with one another, ask questions, and really have that opportunity to be supportive of one another, I mean, what do we do? Everybody's just in their own silo. So I feel like I'm blabbing already, you guys. I'm just so excited for this opportunity. And I really love what this organization is doing. So I also want to take a moment to introduce Elizabeth Fox, who is our interpreter today, who's awesome. And she told me to expect that when she's interpreting for Rebecca and she's interpreting for Nicholas, her tone may sound a little different because what they do as interpreters is they actually want to try to also project I don't know, would you say their individual voice? Like, is that a rude thing to say, you guys? Is that even the right way to express it? Your unique affect and personality.
Yes, exactly. This is Nicholas. I would say it's specifically that the interpreters are taking on, tones. As you mentioned before, if people are listening to an audiobook, you hear that vocal intonation and inflection with an audiobook when they're changing characters. So this is not just for the spoken version from ASL into English, but also going from English into ASL, she will match your affect and tone in our language as well. So we know who's speaking. So if there were more than one of you, she would also modulate that way.
Oh my gosh. And that must be also why you see interpreters that have a lot of facial expressions and like body gestures. Does that all also communicate like tone or whatever?
Yeah, great question. So the purpose of facial expression and affect is really, it's all linguistic. So the facial expression is really based on how people are going to show their personality. They might also be asking questions. It's a grammatical feature of ASL. So when you share different facial expression, it changes the meaning of a specific sign. With the body shift, you can do a comparison or a contrasting of two different objects. It also denotes and or. So it's really, ASL is a complex language that people don't often recognize. We do have our own grammar and syntax, as you can see here.
Oh my God, that is so cool. Okay, so another quick note just for the audience. Normally, when I have a guest and they're talking, like Nicholas just was, where he was explaining something, I would normally change the frame so you would just see Nicholas so that everyone would be focused on him and what he's saying. But we have an interpreter this time, so everybody stays in the frame all the time. So it's going to be a little different. This is, I literally almost switched to single vision just of Nicholas. And then I was like, oh, no, I can't do that.
Yeah, so, exactly. Okay, this is good practice, Rebecca said.
Oh, good. Okay, so Rebecca, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about DVAS, what you guys are doing, and kind of how you got started?
Sure, happy to. So yes, Erica, just like you, I was born and raised in Vermont, and my family is all from Vermont. With Deaf Vermonters Advocacy, we are a nonprofit organization, and we were established in 2000 by a woman named Carrie Darling. She is also born and raised in Vermont. She has left the state, but Vermont is in her heart, and she is still actively involved as a consultant for our organization. Amazing woman.
Cool.
So our nonprofit organization supports anyone in the deaf community, from youth to senior citizens, for any situation you can imagine. People encounter a lot of different things where they need advocacy. So we might provide support with filling out forms for a specific entity, because just a side note, ASL is our first language in the deaf community. English is our second language. So oftentimes translating forms is where I come in to help out. Another thing that we do is advocacy, going with people into the courts for a specific date, sometimes going to police stations if they have to file a report, and just making sure that people have access and getting their needs met as they should, because we all are humans, we all have access, we all have rights to that.
Yeah.
I also give presentations and trainings throughout the entire state. So I do everything soup to nuts. And I would say of late, I've been working with parents who have deaf, hard of hearing, or deafblind students in the school system in Vermont. And I would say there's a lot more that we do, but I've been doing a lot of outreach with them. I work with clients, I work with parents, I offer resources to any organizations or agencies who need it. I'm just trying to build bridges as much as I can throughout the state of Vermont. We are a small state, but we are still mighty. So I did actually ask Nicholas to come into this conversation. He's not a staff of DVAS, but he does a lot of work, and I'll actually let Nick kind of go into what he does. So that's the gist of what I do.
Very cool. And that's, Nicholas, just really quick before you get started, I want everyone watching to think about the stuff that you do every single day that requires you to read something, write something, whether it's, listening to the radio, today we're talking about deaf advocacy, but, reading the labels on your soup can, when you're looking for things. Think about all of the things that you do every day that require you to be able to hear someone. So basically, Rebecca, that's like anything like that, that's where you can help step in.
Yes, pretty much. The other thing too is I think a lot of people don't realize that little things mean so much. Think about social media right now. It's so popular.
Mm.
Please just add captions to your social media. It's not just for deaf or hard of hearing people, but it's also for people that have a mild hearing loss or people that want to understand what the conversation or that cool thing on TikTok was. So add the captions, people.
Is
I
that
actually have a person who is deaf who does TikTok videos and social media and always puts on captions when she's signing. And people are like, why are you doing that? You're not speaking. She's like, right. But hearing people don't know what I'm signing. So I caption for all of you. So
I mean,
one
that makes
example.
so much sense.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, it does.
now I'm trying. I'm like, I wonder how. Okay, I'm not going to get stuck on that. I'm like, I want to look now. Am I adding captions to my videos? I need to look into this now. I'm totally writing that down. Okay, so
Yeah. And so
then,
I would say, Erica,
yeah,
auto-generated captions are okay, but they
yeah,
are not 100% accurate all
okay.
the time. So AI does not mean it's going to be tried and true. So just
Oh
keep that
yeah,
in mind when you're actually adding captions.
oh
And
yeah.
this is
No,
Nick,
I've
just to
done
add
that.
into that. Um, just thinking about auto captions, as you know, people in general who are not deaf, you all have tone and affect and different accents based on where you're from.
Yeah.
So when you're speaking, the AI auto captioning might not understand your accent or how you're saying something, and that's when the auto generated caption goes totally askew. So it's not reliable. If you want to have accurate captions, type in what you said yourself.
Okay. All right. Because I've gotten transcripts of videos of mine done before, and I'm like, wow, that is definitely not what I said. And I don't even think I have that much of an accent.
Right, right.
Yes.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
never know.
Wow, man, goodness. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, because if you're from like somebody from Louisiana or Southeast Texas, I can't understand what they're saying, and I have perfectly good hearing. No.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah, so that's why again with auto captioning, it's not reliable.
Okay. All right. So, just a reminder to all of our viewers, if you have any questions for Rebecca and Nicholas, just throw them in the chat. We'll read them. We'll get them answered. And now, Nicholas, Rebecca set you up. She said you're not an employee of Deaf Vermonters Advocacy Services, but you do participate somehow. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Sure, happy to do so. So I am not a Vermonter. I was born in New York City, and I came to Vermont after going to Gallaudet University. So since I've been in Vermont, I've been part of the deaf community, and I have helped out in a variety of ways, sometimes advocating as an educational advocate. I have also been involved with the community doing advocacy for our human rights. So we actually just established a new organization called the Association of Sign Language Vermonters. And the reason that we named it that is because we want to really uphold and share the value and preserve sign language as it's used in Vermont. American Sign Language is our language, and it needs to be recognized as a linguistic human right because this is our communication access as deaf people. And it's not just for deaf people. There are also people who are hearing, like interpreters, children of deaf adults, etc., that also use sign language as their first language. And sign language benefits so many people in so many ways. So we want to honor and uphold that and show that it is a human right. And in Vermont, there was a law that was established that said ASL is a modern language, or maybe a foreign modern language. So it's there, but not a lot of schools offer that. And oftentimes, we just don't think about the kids that need to utilize that. And it's amazing language. We want to spread that further. So that's why this organization got established to really promote that. Really, all children and even everybody to a senior citizen can benefit from that language.
So I'm trying to Google it because I want to show the website. Do you have a website yet?
Good question. We just got started. So
Oh,
we are
okay.
in our infancy stages. We're getting things established. So no website as of
Okay,
yet.
because it's showing me something. Wait, hold on. Can I get this to do what I want? Oh, is it not going to let me? Because I have hold on one second. Hang on. Do what I want. Okay, sorry, you guys. It's being weird about sharing screen because I have So many. There we go. All right. So I Googled it,
Yes,
and I was like, okay, it's there. There's just nothing exactly to click on yet. Okay.
correct.
All right.
Yep.
So we're working it out. We're working it out.
Yes,
More to
still a
come.
work in progress. Yes.
So
Yeah, we just got ourselves established this year. So keep your
now,
eyes posted. And it was 3 people that came together to get this organization going. And we are going to build it from there and see how we can really get our goals established and share that with the public and get involved with legislature in the
so when
future.
you said the way Vermont Sign Language or the way sign language is used in Vermont, there was something about the way you said it that almost made it sound like it's different here than other places. Or do we have a different vernacular or something like that? Is that even the right word to use?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we're focusing on Vermonters as opposed to nationwide. So that's why I mentioned it
Mm.
specifically to those using sign language in Vermont. Um, so let me just give a little quick history. Do you remember the Austin School for the Deaf that was in the Brattleboro area? It was
I
established in 1904.
I actually only know about it because of Rebecca.
Okay, so that did close in 2014. So, yeah. So all the services and programs that were housed there became non-existent. Some did reestablish under other organizations, but a lot of things went away. And so
Wow.
that's when we started to think, okay, how do we shift? How do we look and prioritize American Sign Language? Because after the closure, people really seem to disregard it. And so many people focus on teaching deaf students English when really they need to focus on the first language of ASL before they add a second language. And again, this is our main mode of communication. And this is how we get clear access to what we need. This is our language and it needs to be
Yeah.
recognized. And this is Rebecca. To add into that, ASL is used throughout the United States of America. So it's American Sign Language, thus it's used in America.
Right.
But with that, every state has a slight different accent. So there are regional signs, depending on where you live, that will differ from other states. So it's almost like a vocal accent, but it's a signed accent. So you'll notice there's slightly different signs, but in general, yes, American Sign Language is utilized throughout the states and it is understandable. And this is
That-
Nick, just to add to that, it's just like any other language. Think about English. There are some words that you might say in Vermont that other states don't utilize, and vice versa. So it's
like
the same
wicked.
thing with sign language.
Like wicked.
Yes, exactly. Rebecca's saying 100%, just like wicked.
Okay, wait. What is the sign for wicked? Like Vermonters use it. Oh, wait.
Okay. Depends on the context. That'll change the sign.
Oh, so what if I say it like, oh, wicked? Like that's really good.
Yes, it would be something like this. Either of the way we're signing it right now.
Wait, so this?
Yes.
Okay,
With
this
the
is
with the facial
or this.
expression. You can't leave out the facial expression because that will impact the
Oh,
meaning. Yep.
okay. So wait, this is one too?
Yes. Yeah, either way. So again, depends on the person, depends on the context.
Okay.
And it's a little bit of a stylistic preference. But yes,
Okay.
we have the same concept.
Oh, I'm excited. Okay. So now I want to go back to something I think it was Nicholas might have said. Now is so ESL is sign language considered a language? Like officially like English is a
Do you
language?
mean ASL? You said ESL.
Sorry, ASL. Yes, sorry, ASL.
So American Sign Language, yes, is recognized officially as a language. A lot of states actually have that within their law saying this is the language of deaf people. It's an official language. So if any school wants to have ASL as a course, they can consider it as a modern language, and that can be added in the coursework.
Now, how hard is it to find people to be interpreters? I'm hearing from a lot of folks, as an example, in the medical industry who say they have a shortage of doctors and nurses, and there's other industries that they might have a shortage of.
We have a shortage of interpreters in Vermont. This is Rebecca. Yeah, so specifically for Vermont, in interpreting, it's hard to find. a lot of folks in this field. We have, I'm guessing, about 40 credentialed interpreters. We'd have to actually ask an organization or an agency called VANCRO, Integrated Interpreting Services. They're tremendous.
Yeah.
They work a lot with Vermonters to make sure they procure interpreters for whatever situation they're in, be it a medical appointment, be it a deaf community event, what have you. So also for schools. And they have been doing great work since they've come into Vermont. So look at VANCRO's website, VANCRO. And I mean, we couldn't live without them. And so, yes, to answer your question, even though we have this entity, there's still a shortage. So it's hard to get interpreters sometimes when we need them. We are limited by numbers, specifically interpreters that have an extra credential for working in the legal setting, like in the courts.
Oh, because all the special words. All the jargon.
Yeah, exactly. So they have an extra credential on top of their national credential that gives them the ability to work in the legal realm. It's extra training, extra mentoring, etc. So they're different than a general freelance interpreter. And we do not have a lot of those in the state, and you cannot expect to get them last minute. Oftentimes, if you can get an interpreter like a month in advance, you're good to go.
Wow.
But you can't get one for tomorrow necessarily. But again, with VANCRO, they will do their due diligence to find somebody as best they can. But you can't always like just make an interpreter out of thin air. But, you know, we try our best, especially for emergency situations, but it's not easy. Yeah, Vermont is having a hard time filling those gaps. And ideally, we would have a plethora of interpreters.
Okay, so a couple questions. It's vanco.org.
VANCRO.
CRO.org.
Is it .org? I think. Let me check.
I can Google it too. VAN. I just want to make sure, like, whenever somebody mentions resources, I try to get it up in the chat.
Okay.
Okay, it's not .org. Let's try .com. Providing critical need and demand expertise. No, defense intelligence. Oh, ASL services. Interesting. Okay, VANCRO Integrated Interpretation Services. Oops, is it this guy? Let's see.
Yes, that's it. Okay, great.
All right, cool. So I'm going to add this link into the chat for everybody.
Perfect. Yep.
Okay.
And so the person you see on screen, Corey, that is the head of the Vermont branch. And so Jessica Hutchins is the lead program manager for the Vermont sector. So you can always talk to her to get interpreters throughout the state of Vermont. I would say contact Jessica at any point in time if you have any questions about interpreting, how it works in Vermont. She's an amazing resource.
Okay. Now, the crazy question, is this something you had mentioned? This could be like a language class in high school, right? Like kids take French or Spanish or whatever. They could take in ASL. What could we add this like as a program to tech, the tech schools, since this is something that is this isn't just a language. This is a service. This could be a career for people. It's also something that's very needed. Isn't that something we could promote in our schools?
Sure. Nick said this is a great idea. The question then comes in, like, do we have people that are well adept in both languages, American Sign Language and English? Not only that, but do you also have the person who can teach interpretation and the process of interpreting?
So you want to come
because you can know languages, but you also need someone to, teach interpreting. You can't just have somebody who, is just tracking word for word. It's not a verbatim translation. Again, American Sign Language is its own language, and it's three-dimensional.
Yeah.
So to go from a three-dimensional visual kinesthetic language into something that is spoken linear, that takes a lot of mental work. And people really have to be quite adept at that. So could it be a vocational training program? Hard to say. I know the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf, RID, recommends people getting into the field have a bachelor's degree in interpreting. So it takes time, it takes training, it takes skill.
So this is some... because you go to school for English, or you can get a degree in any language.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And so just consider that. The other thing too is, as I mentioned, there are specialty niches for
Yeah.
interpreting, people that work in the legal field, people that work in the medical field. So like, you wouldn't want to have somebody who's a novice come in and teach interpreting at a novice level. You want
Well,
the really
no.
proficient teachers to be teaching this. And vocational could be a good start. Like if kids
Right.
want to get into the idea of it and then go to college
Yes.
thereafter for interpreting, that's possible.
Yeah, that would be something like, where the kids right now, like at Burlington Technical Center, there's a, oh my God, uh, I don't remember exactly what it's called. It's not like a nursing program, but they're basically like aides. And so they're starting to learn some of the things and they can,
Sorry, hold on one sec.
volunteer.
Rebecca's saying that the interpreter's
Oh,
a little bit choppy. We should make sure we're good tech-wise.
oh, you are breaking up just a little bit, Emily.
Okay. Let's just see how it goes. Make sure the
Oh,
interpreter's...
wait, you brightened back up again. It might have gotten...
All right, the interpreter turned off the Wi-Fi on the phone, so hopefully I can pull better. Okay, we're back. Thank you.
Excellent. So, what I was thinking was, like the medical program, I don't remember exactly what it is. Oh my God, my brain is farting. The kids at Burlington Tech Center, there's a medical program and they're not like becoming nurses out of there, but they're getting a taste of it. They're going to start volunteering to be aides at a nursing home or something like that. So that's what I'm thinking, like if we had something to just start to get people involved and excited and interested.
Yeah, this is Rebecca. I think that's a possibility. But again, you have to think about who's going to be teaching those courses.
Oh,
You need to make
yeah.
sure you have actually culturally deaf people. You don't want to have someone who doesn't know the language. And
Yeah.
yes, it could be someone who's not deaf, who is fluent and native with the language. But again, you have to think about how it's being offered and who is offering it. They have to be vetted. They have to be fully in the language and the culture to present it adequately.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Right. And this is Nick. Just to add, you want to make sure you have the authentic experience and the authentic language. So that's the best way.
Well, and it was interesting when I lived in Austin, Texas. I think I might have shared this with Rebecca. I celebrated 13 years sober this year. And there was a very large deaf population.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. Very large deaf community school population there. And so we had interpreters at my home group, my 12-step home group. And it was like that for them too. And they don't have a special certification for 12-step banter. But they definitely had to have their own set of special signs and things for that specific group of people. So how does ASL evolve and change when new things are invented and you suddenly had to have the word social media or, whatever, like, how does it change?
This is Nick. Yeah, 100%. So just like any language, it evolves. You have new words that come on the scene with new technology. So same with sign language. We have new signs that come up based on what's coming to the forefront, like texting. Before technology and cell phones, texting meant like I had a textbook. And now it's changed to actually texting. You can see the sign I'm using right here. It's like you're texting with your thumbs on your phone. And then it's actually modified even more so, like telephones. The old sign for telephone was this, because that's what it looked like. It was very iconic. Yeah, and then it changed over to this because of the one receiver. And now it's a cell phone because that's how you hold it, or mobile phone. So the signs do adapt and evolve with the changing times.
So who's in charge of that? Like, is there like a committee or a something?
Yeah. So really, it's very unique. It comes from the community. It comes from all of the people in the deaf community. And we talk about what does this mean? What could it sign be? And we don't make a decision overnight. It takes time. It takes conversation until we all come into agreement with that. So it is a community evolution.
Yeah. Is it like, how do you like, hey man, my sign is way better than your sign. We're gonna keep my sign because it's better and cooler or something like
Nope.
that.
There's actually, Rebecca, there's no better or worse. There's no vying for like who's best. It's really, we have a mindset of being open and knowing that everybody signs things differently based on their individual way of being in the world.
And
And
experiences, yeah.
right, exactly. And so everyone grew up with different uses of the language and different backgrounds with the culture. So knowing that, we are open to everybody's way of signing, and then we come to an agreement based on what the collective thinks is the best fit. It's
Like
never,
closest.
I'm better than yours. It's a visual language. We always want to work together to make sure it's visually accurate. And we also know that signs are going to change based on the person too. So we are always looking at individuals, but as the collective. So it's different than I would say most hearing people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is Nick to add to that. Of course, we do have, just like any other language, we have clicks, so to speak. So you're going to have some people that are like, oh, this has got to be better. But in general, we definitely think as a collective. So you might see that one-upmanship, but not too much.
That makes sense. It probably is one of those, like, I imagine, if I don't know if this is an appropriate equation or, comparison, but when you go around the world and you want to go use the bathroom, the little person in the dress and the little person in the pants is one of those things that pretty much everyone understands no matter where you go. So I would imagine it becomes like lowest common denominator. What makes the most sense to most people, and what seems that like easiest to communicate a message.
Hmm. Let's
Not
think about that.
necessarily.
Well, So specifically in the United States, I would say, yes, we go with the lowest common denominator for the most part when evolving our
Yeah.
language and coming up with new signs. But like if there's a new thing, a new concept that we've never even seen or thought about before, we have that communal dialogue and then come to an agreement based on what we're thinking is going to make the most sense.
Okay, that makes sense.
And again, you do have to remember that it depends on your region as well. So there might be some regional differences in the sign based on where you live.
That makes
So
sense.
it's not universal. It's not even universal throughout the United States per se. And of course, there's some signs that are absolutely universal in American Sign Language, but you have the accent.
Yeah.
And there's different regional dialects. And you have to think about geography and the influence of that and the culture from where you live, how that influences your signing as well. So
Oh my
take that
gosh.
in consideration.
I imagine, so it's almost like your signs become your accent from a different region.
Yes. Yep.
I think Rebecca was trying to say something.
Yeah. Sorry, Rebecca, go for it. Yeah, this is Rebecca. So please remember that American Sign Language is not universal. When you go to another country, different sign language,
Oh,
because
yeah,
they have their own spoken language. So of course they're going to have their own sign language as well.
of
So
course.
British Sign Language, while you might have spoken English, British or American, it's still English, but in sign language, it's British Sign Language and American Sign Language. There is a universal gestuno that we use for international conferences, where we come together and agree upon some specific signs to communicate for those bigger international conferences. And the great thing is being deaf people is we're all using a visual language, so we can actually understand each other a little bit better and more readily than somebody who's hearing.
Because there's like context cues.
Yes. Yep, exactly. Yeah. And you can gesture your way through until you figure out what your commonality is. And I feel like as deaf people, we can travel the world and go to other countries and have an easier time communicating with anybody because we're so used to gesturing. It doesn't scare us. We don't freak out like a deer in the headlights.
Oh,
And we're
yeah.
used to a cross-cultural experience. And I mean, it's such a benefit for us to know how to do that. Even though the signs are different because different sign languages, we still have the ability to visually understand each other. We have that common ground, which is great.
That
So
is so
gesturing
cool.
is a huge thing. And, think about that. Yeah, and this is Rebecca. I've got a personal view. in America, we're so monolingual. And I find that people that are not
Mm.
deaf, and mind you, not everybody, it's not a blanket statement, but in general, people that are not deaf, when they meet a deaf person for the first time, they freak out. They are a deer in the headlights and don't know how to communicate with us. But when we go to other countries, they're already used to gesturing. So they're like, oh, you're deaf? Fine, whatever. No big deal. It's so different here in the States. Yeah, very different.
That's so, I didn't even,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, this is Nick. Just to add to that, I had at one point in time, one day, like I got locked out of my car. This is in the old days. Now, mind you, I've got a different car, different keys these days. But I got my keys in the car. I was locked out, and I was in Holyoke, Massachusetts. And I was like, oh, what do I do? So I went to the gas station right nearby, and it was incredible. The person who was at the cash register, I think, was not originally from here, but I started gesturing and he gestured right back to me. And I was like, oh, this is fantastic. He's like, here, how about you use this? Let me make a call for you. Use the bathroom. We'll figure out your key. So gesturing was our key to communicating. And then we wrote back and forth a little bit, but problem solved. I really appreciated how he gestured right from the get-go. And
Yeah.
that does not happen that often with people that are from America originally. Like, people forget you can gesture. Like, you know what this gesture means, right?
Well, yeah. So in Europe, when you're
And like this, you know what that means.
I'm hungry.
But
Where's food?
people never think. And especially when you meet a deaf person, don't freak out. Like, you have a natural ability to gesture and communicate visually, use it.
So do,
So I get used to people not doing that, and it's frustrating, but you do what you can.
so do you think it's because in foreign countries like Europe, there's so many more languages all kind of like meshed together that they have gotten accustomed to having to figure out how to communicate?
Yep. Yes.
Ah, okay. That makes perfect sense. Right. Lack of proximity. What did I tell? This is proving it again. If you're not around people, if you're only ever around people who speak English, then you don't even, how would you even know? You wouldn't even get another way to think about it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you on that. Exposure is
yes.
key. Like, you have to think outside yourself. And if you take that moment to be like, oh, wait, there's somebody communicating differently than me, great, off you go. But being monolingual is really a hindrance to us. And Rebecca's saying, ironically, American Sign Language is the third or fourth most used language in our country. Right, Nick? Yes. Yes.
No
Yes.
kidding. All right. So what would it be like? English, Spanish, ASL? I don't even know what else would be like big groups of immigrants we would have.
French, I want to say.
Oh,
Maybe, I
because
think
of our.
in Spanish. Yeah, it's a good question, but we're around
Ooh,
third or
oh, I'm
fourth.
gonna look this up. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's amazing. Like, more and more people that are not deaf, that are parents of little kiddos, they're starting to sign with their infants because they know that babies can't talk from the get-go. You learn to talk later, but you learn to use your hands real quick. So communicating via sign language, even if you're not deaf, from a very young age, helps you communicate more efficiently and effectively. And it's natural. Like, you can tell what your kiddo needs if they're signing it to you.
This is so interesting. And now you two, okay, so hold on. We've got some questions in the chat. So I want to respect our viewers and ask their questions, but I want to come back to something. You guys have kids. And so I know you get that question all the time. How do you guys deal? Because so we're going to put a pin in that question, and we're going to come back to it after we take some questions from our
Okay,
audience.
great.
So Patricia says, how many Vermonters with physical communication issues? Do you know how many Vermonters there are?
This is Rebecca. So I'm curious what physical communication issues means. So I would say
maybe
roughly.
deaf.
Okay, so if you're speaking specifically of people that are deaf, hard of hearing, and deaf blind, that would be different than maybe a physical communication issue. So in Vermont, the children that are deaf, hard of hearing, deaf blind, about 400. For the general population, from children to senior citizens, we've got about 70,000 Vermonters. that are deaf, hard of hearing, or deafblind. But I think that's based on the census that people have to fill out. And not everybody has filled that out. So people that live really rural may not have filled that out. They may not have understood it because, again, the form is in English, was not offered in ASL, but 70,000 deaf, hard of hearing, deafblind Vermonters.
Oh, wow. Okay. That is a lot more than I
This is Nick.
expected.
Can I add in? So auto captioning, just one thing that talks about that. I don't know if you can see this right now, but deaf comes out as deaf. Maybe you've noticed that, maybe you haven't. So just a heads up on that. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh my God, that's terrible. I want to
Yeah,
see
Rebecca
now.
said
I
that
want to
is
look
so
at
common. They call
wanna-
us deaf.
I want to look at my channel now and see what's happening while we're talking. I'm not going to get distracted though. So, another question, how do we learn sign language? Like how does somebody like me who's not necessarily going to go to bachelor's degree level, but wants to be able to communicate with people and be helpful? Where can we go to learn or take classes?
Sure, this is Nick. I can answer that one. So there's lots of ways you can learn. I would say one option is take a community class. In Vermont, we do have a few pockets that offer community classes, and I'm trying to remember the name of the organization that's offering them currently. Rebecca, help me out. It used to be called 9 East Network. It's changed hands and has a new name, which I cannot recall right now. But I want to say it's the Vermont Early Hearing Detection Intervention under UVM Medical Center. So they do offer community classes, like in Burlington. I think it's at the rec center. They've got some as well. So check your local rec centers or local colleges. But in terms of Vermont colleges offering those classes, University of Vermont is one. We have several ASL classes. There's also Community College of Vermont. Some locations have it, some don't. Yeah, I would start there. And if you look on YouTube, please take it to heart. Not always trustworthy. You cannot guarantee that it's been vetted. So think about that.
Wait, you mean not everything on the internet is true, Nicholas? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Yeah, not all things are true on the internet. So as a person, you have never seen sign language before. How do you know it's actually being taught by a deaf person whose first language is ASL? So just remember that. You might not be getting an authentic and actual course. And Rebecca's saying, if you're interested, please contact my organization or ASL Vermonters or the Vermont Association of the Deaf or Vancro Integrated Interpreting Services and say, hey, what do you have to offer, or who's offering American Sign Language courses that I can trust? And they will provide you with those resources. Because again, you don't want to go to YouTube and learn something that's not true and not accurate and mess up.
This is why, a lot of us were saying that it's bad that you guys are getting rid of the down arrow, the thumbs down, because that's one of the ways that you can tell, like for me, as an example, I sometimes work on my car myself. And if I'm scrolling through looking for somebody who's going to show me how to change my water pump on a Mitsubishi Galant, well, then I want to know if other people thought this guy sucked or not. Like, we need to know this stuff.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
So I'm not crazy. Okay. Let's see. I saw another question. Okay. So we learned some new signs. Oh, this was something we started to talk about a little bit. What is happening in Vermont that needs to be addressed for the deaf community? So is there anything in particular that's going on that so I got two questions. So this is going to come in two parts. One is there anything in particular that the deaf community is dealing with that we generally don't understand that we need to be educated about? Like something we're dumb and we don't see. Or is there an area, like, are there specific kinds of services other than interpretation services that that community needs, that people can help provide? I know that was a lot. That's a big question.
Yeah. Rebecca, you or me? You go first, Nick. I'll add in afterwards. Okay. So, as an educational advocate, I would say, as I mentioned before, The Austin School for the Deaf did close in 2014. Then we had to think, where are all these deaf kids going to school? Where are all the deaf adults who used to work there going? Where are all the deaf senior citizens going to get together and connect? So there are lots of gaps for sure. And oftentimes, service providers are not familiar with our community, with our population, don't know how to work with deaf, hard of hearing, or deafblind individuals. One prime example is deaf kiddos are isolated. Some have actually moved to other states to go to a deaf school because Vermont doesn't have that. We don't have specific services that are working well for deaf students in Vermont. It's very unfortunate. Now, mind you, mainstreaming, like having a deaf student in public school, can work if it's fully accessible. And oftentimes they're not fully accessible. The teachers don't have experience working with this population. So the deaf child really is at a loss. And think about all the children and their social, emotional, cognitive developments. How are they fully going to develop as human beings if language access is not provided? Language helps us grow as human beings. And when American Sign Language is not provided, that language deprivation has tremendous impacts on cognitive abilities, emotional abilities, social experiences. So deaf students often become frustrated with good reason because they're not being able to thrive. And we believe that deaf children have the right to equal education. And ideally, we'd reestablish a deaf school or schools that utilize sign language as the first language for educating, and that there would be deaf role models so the kids knew they're not alone. And we need kids to have that experience. And they're really right now oftentimes immersed in what we call hearing culture. Nobody's deaf. They're the only deaf kiddo. Everybody that's around them does not know their language. So they're not able to socialize and interact as they want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is that sense of lack of belonging. Yeah, and also self-esteem. Like that is going to the wayside because of this. So the impacts are very detrimental. And I think we really need to think about our deaf kids. How can we prepare them to really be full participants in their lives? You know, how are they going to be taxpayers? How are they going to be voters? How are they going to be employed in the world? And how can they be part of society and not be viewed as a burden of society?
Well, and that I want to
Yeah, and so
ask.
that's a huge thing that we're really concerned about right now.
So I remember Rebecca telling me her experience of going to that school, and I actually want to do some research into what happened there, why it closed. But so a couple of questions specifically. Did all of the families, did it become like a community where everybody sort of moved around the school so that they could have access easier?
Yes, everybody had full access in American Sign Language to the school. So I actually went to the Austin School for the Deaf as a kiddo. I grew up in the next town, and Austin was my second family. And for a lot of the students there, just like me, it was their home away from home because we had 100% access in our first language of ASL. Even though my home life was fantastic, they're not deaf. So at the School for the Deaf, guaranteed I could talk to anybody, teachers, students, staff. I didn't have to worry about a communication barrier. So I developed that sense of who I am because I had language, because I could use my natural language. And yes, mainstreaming can be good, but there's so many gaps that come with that, so many barriers that come with that. And oftentimes students lose that sense of belonging. I did mainstream for a few classes in the local public high school, just down the way from Austin, which was all well and good. But again, I had interpreters provided. So I actually had access to my core courses that were offered by hearing teachers. And I don't see that a lot these days with the deaf kids in the mainstream. They're isolated, they're frustrated, they may or may not have interpretation. And I've seen it time and time again where the IEP teams or the 504 teams, they determine what is best, so to speak. And think, oh, you're fine. You have a cochlear implant. You don't need an interpreter. You can hear just fine. And they keep downplaying the students' actual lived experience that they're sharing with them. It's like they're just checking a box to say, we as a school provided these services. Let's call it good. And that's, a lot of factors in Vermont schools these days. Like we're trying to really establish a Bill of Rights for deaf, hard of hearing, and deafblind children to prevent this from happening any further. Because education should be accessible for all.
Well, and this is what I'm wondering, you guys, is, hold on, let me do some math here. So if you were to take, you said there's 400 kiddos approximately who are deaf, hard of hearing that might, as an example, go to the Austin school, right? So if you took those 400 kids, if you took 400 times $20,000, which is how much we allocate per student, that's $8 million a year. Are you telling me we can't run a school for $8 million a year? I mean, I know you guys can't answer this because you were not operating the school, but I'm going, if we had the ability, as an example, to, like school choice or whatever, and if we had the ability where those funds that we as Vermonters all agree that we want to put towards education, right? I believe I have a responsibility to help educate the people in my town and my state. So I would be happy for that money to follow those kids and for them to have the same kind of experience you described, Rebecca. Does is there does your community, does the deaf community ever talk about, like, how can we work together to change this rather than trying to mainstream that doesn't seem to really be most advantageous for people? Let's push this. The dollars follow the child. Let's restart a school. Like, what do we got to do? How can we be helpful? That kind of thing.
Yeah, this is Nick. School choice would be great. It really would, but unfortunately not all towns have that. So that is also prohibitive. School districts will oftentimes choose where the money goes, and that leads to other issues. So again, depending on the district, they might not be familiar with school choice. They might not be willing to do school choice.
Right.
They're also not familiar with what a deaf child needs. So it just reinforces what's happening. And I see that Vermont is big on siloing and keeping kids isolated. They're trying to think, different strategies, what could work best, but they're not looking at the big picture. The solution is there. They're just not looking at it.
Yeah.
And they think about each individual kid as opposed to the collective. So could we get everybody together at the same table and invite deaf leaders, deaf advocates, people that have the lived experience as a deaf person to share how it is to be deaf, to share what it means to have full access in education? Can we get those experts at the table that are deaf, that have the cultural understanding, that have the linguistic understanding? Don't get the specialists to come in, so to speak, like these hearing specialists that have degrees, great, but they don't have the lived experience. We need to make sure we have the minority cultures there. You can't decide as a hearing culture what is best for a deaf person. You're not deaf. You just don't understand. So get the deaf people involved, develop these partnerships, then we will find resolution.
Oh my God. We need to restart the Austin school. Oh, sorry, Rebecca.
Yeah, thank you. It's the mindset of a lot of people in our state that I see time and time again. They just aren't thinking about asking the people that have the experience. Like, they don't say, hey, how can we support you? How can we work together? What I'm noticing is oftentimes they think they know what's best for us, even though they aren't us, and they downplay our experience. And they might say, oh, we'll make some accommodations here and there, but it prolongs the child's education and personal development. They try all these different things, and then maybe last resort, they'll think of like a deaf school. And the specialists, quote unquote, at the table that have the degrees, do they understand? No. And they often think of the medical model of fixing deaf children. Let's give you an implant. Let's make sure you can hear things. That's not going to fix a deaf child. A deaf child doesn't need to be fixed.
Yeah, you don't.
You're prolonging education by not acknowledging that they are a deaf student who uses sign language as their first language. They're fine as they are. Let them be a child. Let them have ASL from the get-go. Let them have the resources they deserve. And talk with parents to give them all of the options, and don't just think, oh, I think I know what's best for you. This is what I've heard from the medical professionals. This is what I've heard from my degree program. Because oftentimes parents come into the world with a deaf child and they're like, I don't know what to do. They rely upon their providers. And that's where we really need to shift the paradigm as well. We need to look at, what are doctors telling parents when a kid is deaf? Are they saying, hey, we got a deaf kid? Or are they going, ooh, I'm so sorry, your child is born with a hearing loss? So think about the mindset and the framing.
So you guys had different I want to see if I don't want to start a marital fight here, but um so I might have heard two different opinions and I want to see if I heard correctly. So one of the things that's interesting is we're talking about the Austin School for the Deaf and making sure that there is a place for people to go where they have all the resources and the people and it's comfortable and it's safe and it's you can really be immersed and all of those amazing experiences, right? And I
Mhm.
mean, if you even other cultures like Jewish people all live around one another so that they can all go to, the synagogue on Saturdays together and not have to drive because that's the thing. You're not allowed to drive, right? So there's like, you create a
Right.
community, you set it up a certain way. But then I also heard Nicholas say something about they silo people. Like sometimes the government will like try to silo people. So what I heard in that comment was
Yeah,
you
what
think
I
it's
meant
bad
was,
that okay, go ahead.
yeah, what I'm meaning is that oftentimes our educational system silos students.
Okay.
Um, so school districts will be their own school district. They're already siloed in that respect. They won't think, oh, is there a school district that has a bunch of other deaf kids? Let's partner with them. Everyone's kind of sticking to their own and
Ah,
not looking at the greater population and making
okay.
decisions for one child as opposed to more children that are local to
Yeah.
them, even if they're in a neighboring town. So I find that our educational system is siloing kids.
Okay. So not that it would be bad for there to be a separate place or a unique place, but that people are not thinking outside of the box and how to cooperate, basically.
Correct.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Got it. Okay. Okay,
Yes.
Caitlin is asking, how can we donate? Oh, that's a good question. Do you guys have any nonprofits, any places where they can donate money, resources?
Ah. um, yeah, I would say you can, as I mentioned, we've got the Association of Sign Language Vermonters, ASL Vermonters. We just got our nonprofit status, so you could donate there. There's also the Vermont Association of the Deaf. They are also a nonprofit, 501c3.
Oh,
Um,
oh,
you
wait.
can also, we've got a national level, which is the National Association of the Deaf. That organization you can certainly donate to. Um, Gosh, there's a few more. I think American Society for Deaf Children is another one.
Oh.
Yeah, so there's a whole host out there.
Okay, so those are some good ones. I'm gonna go back
And
through
Rebecca's
and
saying DVAS also has that status. With donations, we are a nonprofit trying to figure out how to make that all come to fruition. We're trying to cover a lot of unique needs as an advocacy services. So if you want to donate for
oh.
educational purposes, probably don't donate to DVAS. But if for general deaf advocacy services you want to donate, great, by all means.
Okay, and so this is what this was one of the things I had said. Are there services or is there a need to coordinate services for little things like who like, oh, we need people who can do haircuts for people who are hard of hearing or deaf. We need uh automobile repair shops that would be good, or is there like a list of businesses that you guys work with or anything like that?
Hmm. So I would say the biggest thing that you can do is take classes in the community so you can be part of the community and learn the language. Um, think about K through 12 programs. Can we encourage people to take ASL classes? Can we get that going from a young age so we can just communicate naturally? That will in turn make businesses more accessible. So create less barriers by taking language courses so we can just communicate with you. All right. Yeah, and this is Rebecca to add into that. Um, Different organizations, companies, agencies throughout the state of Vermont, please reach out to deaf organizations like mine,
Mm.
Deaf Vermonters Advocacy Services, because I offer trainings specifically about deaf culture, our language. For example, I go to the police academy anytime they have a new cohort of cadets to talk about deaf awareness, to talk about accessibility, to talk about best practices in working with deaf and hard of hearing and deafblind people. So I'm happy to train anyone. I would love it if more businesses and companies and agencies ask me for those trainings, because then I can spread that knowledge and you can become more well-versed with our community and work with us better. So I'm happy to provide trainings anytime. Just reach out. So if you have any questions, I feel like there's no stupid question out there. Just ask. I'm an open book. I'm happy to talk about anything. This is your opportunity. I don't bite. I'm not going to eye roll you. I'm going to tell it like it is, and happy to have those conversations.
And that is one of the things, Rebecca, that I so appreciated about our call and our introductory meeting, because I think nowadays it's like if you don't already know something and you ask a question, you're you're stupid, and oh, I can't believe you didn't know that. And as an example, I'll give you a great example. My husband is Black. I had never dated a Black guy before. Just hadn't. It just, I grew up in the whitest state in the union. There just weren't a lot of options, right? So then Benjamin and I start dating, and there are words that mean something different depending on the color of your skin. And I said, I won't even say it on this call because somebody will probably cut it out and clip it and make me sound bad. But Benjamin would be like, "Oh, don't say that. Don't say that. For Black people, that word means this," or whatever. But living in Texas, I had all these Black friends who would like, "Oh, you don't know what that word means," or I could ask questions about the culture, or I could, and there was no shame, and I wasn't made to feel stupid. But I think sometimes people do that nowadays.
Yeah, it's true. This is Nick. I would say in terms of deaf culture, hearing culture, people look at the word deaf as something that's bad. They automatically assume we are hearing impaired. Think about that phrase. Why would you call someone hearing impaired? We're not impaired. We're not broken. It's actually very offensive to say hearing impaired. We have a cultural identity, so please call us deaf or hard of hearing or deafblind. We are not lacking anything, which impairment has a connotation of. We are not broken. We are not hindered because we can't hear. Again, we have our own language and culture, which sets us apart as a cultural minority, a linguistic minority. So think about people that are trying to learn English as a second language. We are also in that category. Yeah, so be mindful of the words you use and strike hearing impaired from your vocabulary, and ask people what they want, how they want to be identified. Make them tell you as opposed to assuming.
Yeah.
And Rebecca said, oh my gosh, I agree 100%. Just thinking about society, in the deaf, hard of hearing, deafblind community, oftentimes we're viewed as disabled. We do not view ourselves as such. We do not like to utilize that label. Under the federal eyes, they see us as such to provide accommodations. Fine. But really, disabilities means having something that is setting you apart, even though you have the same linguistic culture, English. We are different. We are, again, a linguistic cultural minority as deaf people. ASL is our first language. We have our own cultural norms. We have our own community. So people that have a wheelchair that they're using or are blind and are hearing, sure, they might call themselves disabled, but we're not disabled. We have a shared culture and language.
That is so
yeah, Erica, I can see you want to add something. And can I add more?
Yeah. No, go.
All right. So society is designed to make us disabled. We are not disabled. Society is disabling us. So let's just flip that frame. If the word was full of deaf people and everybody used America's Sign Language or a sign language, and there was somebody who was born hearing and didn't know this language, who's disabled then? The hearing person, because they don't know sign language. So think about it.
That is interesting.
So we have to flip the script.
Well, it's one of those things that, even I remember early on in sobriety, you go to the meeting and you say, I'm Erica and I'm a, alcoholic, or I'm an addict, or you say whatever. And I remember at one point someone saying to me, I understand why you guys do that, but you should stop. because you are continuously, repeatedly calling yourself something that is negative. And you're like, and you're holding on to that negative identity, as opposed to like seeing yourself as a recovered person or a well person or whatever. So is it that same kind of like, it's we have this need to put ourselves and to put people in boxes so that we can just like decide either we're going to deal with people or we're not, or this is how we're going to deal with it or not. And so it's like, I feel like maybe that's what you're saying. Like, we're human beings and we have our own culture. I don't need your pity. I don't need you to feel bad for me. I don't need you to treat me like I'm some kind of a whatever. Don't relate to me that way, because I'm not.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. And I'm so glad you mentioned that because so often society looks at hearing loss as just that, a hearing loss. Think about the words loss. You're already set up to have a negative
Everything's
connotation.
negative.
Why
Yes.
don't we think of it as positive? Can't we do a reframe? Like, can we just be called deaf and have deaf gain? Because being deaf in the world provides you with so many benefits. Our eyes are so acute to seeing the world differently. We are visually attuned to so much more than people that are hearing are. And so we're very sensitive to the world around us. We have something to give, and people don't look at it like that. And think about baby sign language. People are using that left and right. That is deaf gain. You're using our language to teach your children to communicate easier from a younger age. We're contributing to society in ways you don't even realize. Not only that, don't forget the huddle, Rebecca's saying. Right, tell them about the huddle. So in football, when teams huddle up, people don't realize that came from deaf people. Thank you very much. Back in like the 1800s. So there's so many things that deaf people contribute to society that you're unaware of, that you should be aware of, like technology. Think about right now. You've got your texting on your phone, right?
Yeah.
The first time people started texting was among the deaf community. Like back in the early 90s, people had the flip phone. And people are so accustomed to, we're very audio centric in the United
Yes.
States. You think about what
Big
things
time.
sound like, but we set up texting for our needs, and now everybody texts. That came from deaf people. Yeah, and people using the telephone, we have to figure out how, as deaf people, are we going to connect? And so we had the modem developed for our community so we could type across a wire to somebody else. And that became the
Wow.
internet. So thank you. We have contributed that. You are welcome.
Oh my
People don't
goodness.
realize that we have given so much to society, and you just take it for granted. So we have things to contribute. Rebecca said the other thing to remember too is if you take the time to gesture and sign, that goes a
Yeah.
long way. And you already know a lot of it. There was a person in the hospital who was not deaf, they were hearing, and they had a tube down their throat.
Oh.
They could still potentially communicate with sign. Think about that. So we can contribute in so many ways that will help you in the long run for any situation you encounter.
Wow.
And think about scuba diving. You can communicate underwater with ASL. Just think about that. If you were trying to communicate in any other way underwater, that's not
Oh
going to
yeah,
go well.
you can't. That's not, no, it's not a
Yeah,
thing.
so use sign language. Again, this is deaf gain. There's no hearing loss about us. It is all deaf gain. We exist in the world for a reason, and we've been here for generations.
Oh, wow.
Rebecca's just going to add in here. So you asked about kids. Yes, we have 4
yes.
kiddos.
Yes. Okay.
So yes, we've got 4 kids, all hearing. So at our dinner table, we can have a full-on meal and chat it up in ASL. We don't have to pause and be like, wait, let me just swallow this bite. You don't have to worry about that in ASL. You chew your food, you have a conversation, all is well.
No talking with your mouth full.
Yeah, it does not apply. And think about this. If you go to a show or, I don't know, sporting event in a stadium, you don't have to yell across the room or across the field. You can sign and see that conversation. It's great.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's like little things. All these little things. Okay, hold on. Somebody asked, what about theater? Laura, say more about what your question is. What about theater? I don't know what that means. Like, can you go to the theater? Wait, no, wait. Are there any movie theaters that have captioning?
Yes, yes. This is Rebecca. So at theaters, sometimes they have open captions, which they're just on the screen. Depending on where you're located, they will have that. They might have like the Google Glasses type of thing that has the captions on the glass. Personally, I don't like those. Not a huge fan. It's awkward.
Yeah.
Or you can get the cup holder caption screen to go in your cup holder so you can see that. I prefer open captioning because then it's just on the screen. I don't have to look at a device and then look at the screen. But yes, most theaters have options. I would say if you're talking about actual theatrical performances, get interpreters. Make sure it's accessible in
Wow.
ASL.
Cool. This is so cool. Oh my God. I just want to keep talking to you guys. So your kid's first language was ASL.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Easy peasy.
So this
Communication access from the get-go. And now it's their second language is English. And there's people think, oh my God, they're going to be delayed in learning English. That's not true. Think about anyone who's bilingual, bicultural. If people grow up in a household with two languages, they're going to pick them both up.
And I guess if you're concerned about like auditory speaking, it's not like they're not around people talking, right? I'm sure you have family and friends that are around talking to them. So,
correct. Yes, exactly.
Okay. So let me think of.
Yeah. And so it's natural language acquisition. So if they're hanging out with deaf people, they're going to be signing. If they're going to hang out with hearing people, they're going to pick up spoken language. And our kids are bilingual through and through. Yeah, they are definitely bilingual.
I think that is so cool. And I wonder too, just about, they talk about whenever you're learning, being able to connect the two hemispheres of the brain. And so you're using language skills, but you're also making physical motions. Are deaf people smarter than hearing people? That's my question.
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked. So in terms of language, it's all on one side of the brain.
Oh, yeah?
Yep. It's all on one side of the brain. The other side is where the gestures come in. So that physical component. Yes.
Yeah.
So we're using more of our hemispheres than other people.
Saying. So probably deaf people are smarter than hearing people. All I'm saying. I mean, I'm not a scientist. I don't know these things.
Yeah, I'm not a scientist either, but maybe. Yeah, we'll leave that for everyone to think about. And Rebecca said, honestly, I would say yes. Because we're so adept as deaf people at accommodating this hearing world. We have a mindset to be open. You all are so monolingual and accustomed to one way of being in the world, so you're not using all of your brain. You're not using all of your faculties. Yeah, and Nick is just adding, so English is very linear as a language. It's word upon word strung together on a page or coming out of your mouth. Yes, you can add some intonation, but ASL, like I said, is a three-dimensional language. It's like instead of playing one note on a piano, it's a chord. That is ASL. It is everything put together so you hear or see it really all at once. So it's very different than English.
Amanda said, Rebecca, you're so right. Exactly. OMG about your last comment. So Amanda also agrees that deaf people are smarter.
Thank you, Amanda.
Okay.
So I was just thinking too, this is Rebecca again.
Yeah.
With Vermont, I really want people in Vermont to recognize that you can reach out to us, talk to deaf organizations, ask what's going on, see what the resources are, get more information, educate yourself. Stop thinking that you know enough. We never know enough. Be open, learn about our community, learn about our language. Don't be afraid to ask. And there's sometimes I might not have an answer to your question, but I will point you in the right direction to get you that information that you need and the resources that will help you. So think about people that work in hospitals or court systems or people that are different employers.
Yeah.
They're not fully accessible. So if you're working there, try to make it accessible. If you don't work there, think about how you can assist and advocate to make things accessible. I think about awareness of our culture, that is the biggest thing you can do. Learn. So we don't have to take this all on ourselves. Be willing to learn. Be willing to come to the table. Be willing to listen to us because we know our own experience. Don't think that you know it and you're not all that in a bag of chips, because you're not. And this is Nick. Again, if you are willing to work with us, you create less harm. So think about harm reduction.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it really is. We need to be in the world. There's a lot of people out there who will complain and say, woe is me, or woe is the society, and oh, the cultural degradation. Oh, everything is terrible. And then they sit on their behind and watch YouTube all night or TV all night. They don't participate. They're not mentoring kids at the Boys and Girls Club. They're not, bringing food to the homeless. They're not. And it's like, it always is strange to me that people think that somehow like the government's just going to jump in and save everybody. And I'm like, yeah, it doesn't work that way. And also, the government's like, first of all, the government's 9 to 5. Okay. They're not going to be around in the evenings when you really need things. Also, the government is about the government. They're not about you. So I think, one of the things you said earlier, Nick, I think it was Nick, you were saying that sometimes it just feels like the person is checking boxes, or maybe it was Rebecca talking about some of the like school stuff, right? These people, they don't really know how to be helpful. And it is their job to show up and check boxes. It is not their job to really be there with people, knee to knee, helping them, making sure that they're emotionally well and taken care of, that they have identity, belonging, and purpose. They're just there to check boxes. And that is not meant to be mean or say that they're bad people or anything like that. But in my experience, the real good that gets done in our community and the ways that I've seen miraculous transformation in people's lives is one human being helping another human being for no financial gain or recognition. And that's what I would like to see more in our state, in our society, in our culture, is just this remembrance that we're responsible for one another and taking care of each other. And don't sit on your couch by yourself. Go get out there, do something.
Yeah. Yep.
So I want to give.
Yeah. And it just building bridges, like I talked about. Let's work together. The outcome will be even better if we work together. We can't work in isolation. We can't be about ourselves as individuals.
And it doesn't matter what. It doesn't matter if you can hear or not. It doesn't matter if you can see or not. None of that crap matters. We need each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing that I love to think about is biodiversity. That one word means so much. Can we come together and contribute all of our individual skill sets and experiences? That is biodiversity. We have so much to offer each other, and we can be better because of that.
Yep.
Yeah, so biodiversity goes a long way. Keep that in mind.
I love this. Okay. So we have been talking for almost 90 minutes, you guys. This has just been awesome. And I feel like we could just keep talking, but I know I want to honor your time. And I got to get up real early tomorrow morning. So, but I want you both to have the last word. So, is there anything else that we haven't talked about, missed, that you just want to make sure, either you just want to make sure gets out there, or something you want the viewers to leave with?
Nick, Rebecca, you go.
Don't be shy, Rebecca. You had a lot to say at our last meeting.
I know. I feel like I'm just repeating myself, though, but I will.
I know, we did get through a lot.
Yeah, I would say for those audience members out there that are curious about our culture or want to have a conversation, contact me. There's no stupid question. I'm always happy to have a conversation about anything you want to know more about. So come to me. It's safe. It's comfortable. I'll make it comfortable. Reach out. Let's have that conversation. And I would say we do want to establish a Bill of Rights for deaf, hard of hearing, deafblind children, especially for those kids in the educational system. So work with me. If you're on board with that, reach out, let's have a conversation and keep that ball rolling, because I really do want to work with more people. The more, the better. You know, I can't work alone. I have to have these partnerships. I work with other deaf organizations. I'm happy to work with not deaf organizations if you want to be on board. So contact me anytime.
I love that. And we're all of the links for DVAS and stuff like that are in the description for everybody. Then there's some extra links in the chat. So go look at the comments, but also their Rebecca's organization, all their links for social media and everything is in the description of this video. So go look. And then I think Nick was going to say something.
Thank you. I would say, just in closing, try to get different perspectives. Remember, there's not one right way. Think about all the different ways of being and glean from those people. Reach out to deaf people. Talk to deaf people. Be it a child, be it an adult. Think about the impact that can have in your life and in somebody else's life. And like Rebecca mentioned, talk to the organizations that already exist. Please be open-minded. Once you do that, we are going to have phenomenal outcomes in working together. So talk to deaf people. Don't be afraid. Doesn't matter if you ask a question, you feel like, oh my God, is it stupid? No, ask it away, because you're always going to learn no matter what. We all are still learning on a daily basis. There's no end to that. So don't be afraid to ask. Please reach out, be bold.
I love it. I love it. And we got to figure out how to get Austin School reopened too. That makes me sad.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's another thing too. You could, we could set up regional programs, if not an actual school for the deaf in one place. So there's different ways we can make this work for deaf kids.
Gosh. Oh my God, there's so many opportunities. People just need to, you know what? You're right. People just need to sit down together and go, okay, what do we have? What are the resources we have? Where is the need? And how do we fill it? How do we take what we have, fill what we need, and then, fill in the gaps? Oh, I love it. Okay. So anybody watching, if you've got a business, if you've got a specific service you want to help contribute or donate, reach out to Rebecca. Again, all the links are in the description. Let people know how you can contribute, what you want to contribute. If you've got a corporation or a business, you want to bring Rebecca in to do training, to help understand the deaf community, reach out. These two are awesome. First, you guys are awesome. This was super fun. I love having these conversations because I just love being around people who are about getting stuff done. You see that there is a need and you are about fixing it and filling it. And that is exactly the kind of people that we need to be here. So thank you. Thank you both for your work and your efforts. Thank you for educating all of us, for taking the time to be with me and my viewers today. And bless you. And I just bless you in the work that you're doing. Just
thank you so much from both of us. Thank you for inviting us to have this conversation.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so hold on with me one, guys. I'm gonna take us out with the video.
And if you want to applaud, this is how you applaud in our culture.
Excellent. Thank you. I love it. Oh my gosh, this has been awesome. Okay, hold on with me, guys.